Hey, so in these series of videos, we've talked about all the things that can get you prepared and ready to start writing your book. Writing space, writing routine, structure, characters, location, all of those kind of things which are important in creating the foundations. But there comes a moment when you actually stop building the foundations because you look around and realize that they're ready. And now the next step is to get started. Now, for some people, making the step from the foundations to getting started is quite seamless. And for other people, making the step from the foundations to getting started is full of nerves, or has a degree of nerves and trepidation and uncertainty, maybe even some insecurity mixed in with it. So the first thing to say that is completely normal. You know, almost every single writer, professional, even the most successful, would be lying if they said that they didn't sit down on the first day of writing their book and face the blank page and didn't feel an element of, whoa, you know, I'm about to step on a roller coaster and I'm not sure what's going to happen here and I feel a little bit scared of it. So that's the first thing to feel. If you are someone that feels an element of nerves about getting started, or your writing in general, know that that's quite normal. There's nothing to beat yourself up about if you feel that. And so what I wanted to do today was approach the whole point of this kind of writing book, which is, you know, getting started. So we're going to talk about something today called beginning writing. Now, in another video, I am actually going to give you like a more of an internal structure for a chapter 1 or an introduction, and give you a starting point, like a specific starting point, if you feel that you should need that. But before we get to that point, I just want to set up this concept of, well, what is beginning writing? So first of all, I think if you are someone that's scared of the blank page, something that you can do before starting is to, you know, obviously get yourself on your sacred writing space. And if you're someone that, you know, believes in, you know, the universe or some, you know, a God type figure or a higher self, you could just sort of take some deep breaths and anchor yourself and ask for guidance and support. You could, like me, just tune into the book or tune into the main character of your book. Any kind of maybe nice ritual you can do to get yourself into that receiving mode is a really great thing to do. Remember, we talked about, you know, when you enter our writing space, we kind of pull back, we close the curtains on the outside world. So anything in our space, we can allow creativity to come through. So if you're someone that likes to think of your book or your writing as a download and you as the receiver, that might be kind of a really cool way to think of it. When you start writing, sometimes you kind of want to come up with the perfect first sentence. But you know, we talked about first sentences in the deeper training call on the dissection of an opening chapter. But it's not necessarily true that you need to come up with that perfect first sentence to start writing. What is an easier way? There's a lot of pressure if you do. That's what I'm trying to say. When you're kind of thinking this first chapter, it's got to have this, it can't do this, it's got to be like this, it's got to be as good as that. All you're doing is placing quite a lot of pressure on yourself. And one thing that creativity doesn't like is that element of pressure sort of weighing down on its shoulders. Then you start to contract. So what you can just start doing instead is just start writing. So open up your Word document and start writing. Imagine it as a writing prompt. Just start writing anything. You're not necessarily writing your book. You can sit there and tell yourself, I'm writing, but I'm not writing my book, so really it's not that important. So I can just see what's going to come out in the process. If you can't think of a single thing to write about, you know, you could just look around you and say, well, I write about, you know, my toy owl that I see on the wall, or I write about the weather today, or I write about how I'm actually scared about writing about something. Sometimes, you know, just starting off literally on anything just helps you get into that rhythm and that flow of literally writing. And then writing, like I said, always begets more writing. So the very act of writing something will open up the channel for the real thing to start flowing through. Some people actually start their book by starting on literally their favorite chapters. Maybe they have like a really strong chapter in mind, but that's in the middle of the book. It could be like a wedding scene or like a really great thing that happens, and you decide you want to start your book on that moment because that's something which is kind of, you're really excited about starting that, you know, that writing that part. So that's an easier starting point for you. But wherever you do start, you just find a point to start, or you don't find a point to start. You just start by writing something, you know, even if something appears on the page, and you just start writing. Now, what I wanted to say about this is that you will never write the perfect beginning to your book on your first attempt. Never's really strong, so I will change that to probably 98% of the time. You probably won't write the perfect beginning to your book on the first attempt. So don't waste the next few days or weeks or months trying to get the beginning of your book perfect. It's just not worth the time. It's a waste of time, actually, you know, because I'll talk about that in a second. A good mindset to have is when you're starting your book is to imagine yourself like a traveller. You know, you've got the backpack on, you've got the posh kind of suitcase by your side, and you're literally just taking the first step off the aeroplane and looking around you. You know, you're bound to feel a bit like, whoa, you know, overwhelmed or tentative or self-conscious. And that's because at the beginning stages of writing a book, you're still developing and finding the voice in which you're going to be writing the book. You're still developing and finding the style, as it were, the rhythm, the flow, the words, the story. It's a bit like trying on a new, you know, going to the clothes shop and buying this kind of amazing new coat, and you try it on for the first time, and actually it kind of feels really weird and a bit strange, and because it's something new to what you're normally doing, but very soon you get used to it. You know, so just as you kind of take your first driving lesson and the car kangaroos all over the road, be patient with yourself in the first few days of writing. You might not be your most efficient. You probably won't be at your best. And even if you've been writing in your journal, it's a very different thing to start actually writing your book, because at some point in the back of your mind is this thought that, oh my gosh, someone's actually going to read this. So when you start writing your book, particularly on the opening chapters now, be patient with yourself, because what is going to come out might not necessarily be what you really would like it to be, and it might not be perfect, but all you're doing is just almost like, you know, the runner like warming up for his marathon. You're doing some warm-up laps, and that's how I tend to see the beginning of my book. I'm warming up. I'm warming up as I'm getting into it. You know, quite often from experience and talking to other writers don't tend to hit their stride until at least 5 or 10,000 words into their book. Around this point or later is when your writing tends to enter a more effortless phase, when it feels far more easier to write. You're in your groove, your voice feels natural, you know, your words flow, you know, and the magic starts really happening. So in the early days of writing, what we call beginning writing versus writing the beginning. Writing the beginning is like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here and I'm writing the beginning of my book. Whereas beginning writing is when you're just kind of like being patient with yourself and just being easygoing and not really caring how badly it starts or where it starts. Even, to be honest with you, we can get hung up on where it starts. You know, your opening few words in the beginning writing is going to feel rusty, it's going to be self-conscious. But what I would strongly suggest is to resist the urge to keep editing them and improving them, or being really critical, or kind of keep going back. Your opening chapter, this is really important, your opening chapter is just a way for you to find your way into the book. That's it. It's just a way for you to find your voice. Think of it as a warm-up. Think of the whole book as a warm-up if you want, if it makes it easier, versus right in the beginning and having to get it all perfect, putting pressure on yourself to get it absolutely right, that everything needs to be flowing right from the word go. That's just a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And sometimes, the best way to kind of write a book is to, approach it with a feeling of excitement and trepidation and uncertainty, and just being able to give yourself, making mistakes and just beginning writing. You're just somebody beginning writing a book, and it doesn't really matter what goes on the page. And the first chapter particularly is always the chapter that tends to get edited the most, because when we write the book, lots of things develop through the course of the writing the book, even if you had a plan. And particularly, if you didn't have much of a plan, lots of unexpected things happen. And so quite often over the course of the book, you'll notice that things, actually the beginning needs to be like this now, it needs to be like that now. Oh, okay. So that's why the beginning of the book always changes, because when you write the book, particularly when you get to the ending, you can look back from that perspective and realize, oh, the beginning really needed to start there. But you only tend to get that perspective once you've written the book. I know that happened for me. And so that's another reason why not to get too hung up on the opening chapter, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to change it completely, or you're going to change it at least 50% of the time, particularly in fiction, to suit what happens in the rest of the book. So don't try to think, oh my gosh, it needs to be perfect. Just see it as, I'm doing my warm-up exercises, I'm getting started, and I'm just giving it a go, and I'm allowing myself to get in the groove with my beginning writing.